Completed in 1952, Unité de Habitation is a communal housing complex designed by Le Corbusier in Marseille, France. Le Corbusier was employed to design the complex to provide housing for the masses that were displaced by the bombings and warfare of the Second World War.
Le Corbusier envisioned a vertical city that operated entirely within the volume of his design. With the functions of the city all within the walls of his structure, the area around the building could be left natural for residents to enjoy. As the building was meant to contain all of the functions of the city, it hosts both private quarters and communal spaces for all residents.
The idea was to reshape the modern cities and get all the lost qualities of traditional housing, views, big green spaces, and optimal sanitary conditions for all the inhabitants. He proposes to condense the program of an area vertically and to build these large units as independent, small autonomous neighborhoods. And as a neighborhood, pack all necessary equipments such as shops, sport areas, recreational areas and spaces in the building, and leave big green spaces, sun and views around the building.
The project was based on L-shaped apartments that were inserted into a grid calculated by the principle of modular. This design reduced the number of corridors and increased the number of apartments. Main construction materials were reinforced concrete with a visible coating and glass. Building technologies such as noise reduction, heating system with duct warm air, and mechanical ventilation were used in the project. Initially, a steel frame with model prefabricated apartment inside was the constructive idea of the building. However, this innovation was abandoned, but the idea of factory assembly was applied to some part of the building structure. Finally, the grand opening was in 1952, but the estimated construction period of 1 year was to be extended to 5 years, and the estimated cost increased by almost 8.
As a very influential building, l'Unité d'Habitation also became an object of criticism. Starting from the building regulations, it was confirmed in July 1949 that the project was exempt from the need of a building license. As a result, some living spaces above all the long access corridors were entirely dependent on mechanical ventilation that could also lead to health problems. Moreover, the floor-to-the-ceiling height of only 2.26 meters was less than the legal minimum. Also, the structure of the building is conceptually flawed in many ways. The artificial ground is basically a transverse structure that serves no useful purpose other than complying with Le Corbusier's first point of architecture. Furthermore, various designs feature increased its expense, such as the density of the columns above the artificial ground being too high to reap the economic benefits of reinforced concrete. From a social point of view, it was never completely clear at Unité which type of people were to be accommodated, but since this was to become the prototype of housing all over the world, it could be assumed that it would suit every man. Le Corbusier's ideas about the image of an ordinary person were utopian. Thus, the residential unit turned out to be inflexible and inconvenient for living in it.
Now we can look for the advantages and issues from the environmental point of perspective. In terms of social housing, there are some problems, which are high-rise building, the only entrance to the building, lack of external private space, corridors with apartments on both sides, massive blocks of slabs, L-shaped apartments and blind and walls. Nevertheless, we cannot ignore the importance of vertical city. The Unité d'Habitation is essentially a city within a city that is spatially as well as functionally optimized for the residents. The question is how he can manage to put all city in a building. Since 1943, Le Corbusier had been working on a new measuring system, which he called Le Modulaire. From the point of environmental view, Le Corbusier was able to create a modular apartment of various types without changing the structural stage of building and minimizing the number of distribution corridors and minimizing the cost of construction.
When Corbusier was called in to build apartments for the Marseille municipality, no plan of development for the state existed. and the lack of any such balance reflected in the chaotic rebuilding in the old port. It's unlikely that anything built in an unplanned environment can produce out of the blue a patch of balanced urbanism. Therefore, we suggest that in discussing this aspect of the project, we examine it as it's used in the plan for Saint-Douai. We also suggest to discuss how interpretation was an important parameter for surrounding zoning and how this affected the design of surrounding buildings and zoning. The relationship remains only on the functions on today's multifunctional residence designs.